Cool cucumber.
Cool cucumber.
Cool cucumber.
Welcome to Cool Cucumber TV.
Sauvage cucumbers, Ritz and Maldon Salt.
Hello and welcome to the latest packed edition of Cool Cucumber TV. This time we begin in the heart of London with Jason Atherton's amazingly and deservedly successful Pollen Street Social. Before talking to Heston Blumenthal about starting from nothing and about the way our taste changes through time, Rupert Ponsonby from the Beer Academy talks about 6 favourite British beers. We rush up north to Yorkshire and Jonathan Harrison's rural gem, the Sandpiper in Wensleydale. William Curley, chocolatier and patissier, walks us through his new book. And finally, we return to the Ritz, where John Williams cooks his favourite lobster with Maldon sea salt. Jason, here we are, Pollen Street Social, open just over a year now.
That's right.
Phenomenal trade. It's incredible. Difficult to get a table, but try hard enough and you can. This is wonderful. A pudding table or dessert bar. What do you call this?
Yeah, so it's loosely based around a sushi counter you'd find in Asia.
Yeah.
My family are Asian, and obviously not my direct side, but my wife's side. And we spend a lot of time out there, so it was. I felt that if we could bring something back from that part of the world, what people are familiar with over here, but somehow mould it into a European-style cuisine, hence the dessert bar, because the dessert, for me, it's not a forgotten art, but every time you set up a kitchen, the chef always puts the pastry chef at the back of the room, and they get this really bad little section to work on.
True.
And it's like the last section to leave at night.
Sure.
So I want to build something where these guys are proud to work in it, you know?
Right.
And they can have interaction with the guests, and it kind of works, you know, it's kind of cool.
So how does this work then? I come and have my lunch and my dinner.
Yeah.
I've had my main course. What happens then?
Then we obviously, you know, if you're a big foodie and we want to, you want to see more, then we say, right, you know, would you like to come to the pudding bar? And you either say yes or no. You know, you either stay with your guests and carry on your meal at your table, or you can come up and watch the guys work.
Well, I bet most people do want to come up then.
Yeah, it gets pretty full.
Yeah.
So it's doing really well. So we're very pleased with it. I've just introduced one into our new restaurant in Singapore.
Right.
And again, Singaporeans love their dessert, so it's just going down great guns.
Jason, how many people do you see here?
We've got about 67 seats in total. Obviously, dessert bar's extra, but we don't sell those. That's just first come, first served basis. And we normally do about between 90 and 100 for lunch every day, and then we do about 130 for dinner.
Well, the nice thing about the restaurant, it's spacious. You don't feel cramped at all. The tables are well laid out. There's plenty of room for people to move,
Yep.
which is, I think, is so important. You don't feel like you're in a small area. The inspiration behind the restaurant and the menu, looking through this, obviously these are dishes you developed over many years.
Yeah. I mean, what's really important for me is to use totally British ingredients, apart from the odd little, the odd little nods towards Spain or Italy or France, because they're right on our doorstep. So for instance, if I can't find a ham better than Iberico ham, I'll use Iberico ham.
Sure.
But at the same time, I always try and make sure the main protein on the plate is from the British Isles, because I'm a British chef. I class myself as a modern British chef, and I want to really emphasise how good the produce is here in the UK.
Right.
So I always take that as my first port of call, and then I expand on that. I also use little techniques I've picked up in Asia. I spend a lot of time out there with my family, and I've got a couple of restaurants out there, one in China, 2 in Singapore, and then we're about to do a tapas bar in Hong Kong later on in the year.
Really?
So it's it's how can you not travel to those places and not pick up little tips and techniques? It's impossible,
Sure. You built up quite a nice little empire with these restaurants.
Yeah.
In China.
Well, I mean, you know what? I just take life very simply. I just let life grow organically, and what will be. And if I'm very lucky that my business partner Mavis we use from Singapore has a huge infrastructure out in that part of the world, so it enables me to be able to concentrate here at Pollen Street. And I have an array of talent who work for me, and I want to make their lives better. You know, and if I can give them better jobs, you know, I make sure each chef who opens a restaurant for me is a chef patron, so they have a percentage, and they run their businesses properly. And that means that I can stay at Pollen Street and do what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Sure, good. Well, most of your time is spent here in Pollen Street.
Yes, absolutely. A good 75% of it.
Yeah. Okay, the influences on the menu we've talked about, but there's some really interesting ones. Tartre of fallow deer.
Yeah.
Unusual.
Well, that was inspired by one of my favourite restaurants, is L'Atelier de Robuchon in Paris, the original one in Saint Etienne. And he does a beautiful steak tartare dish, which is, you know, not too crazy, but it's just so well executed. And when I ate it, I'm like, how can I do it? I don't want to do steak tartare, I want to do something a little bit different. Sure. So I thought, well, you know, fallow deer is such a delicate flavour, it lends itself to be made into a tartare. So that's when we start taking inspiration like that.
One of my all-time favourites is salt marsh lamb.
Yeah.
Which I see you use the shoulder.
Yeah.
Shoulder somehow to me is much better than leg. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as long as you, when we cook it, we actually put lamb fat into the process to help keep it moist while it's cooking, and then we drain it all off and then put it into little backpack bags and then heat them up in the water bath, which keeps it really nice and super tender. Sure. We serve that with a nice rack of salt marsh lamb to sort of make it a little bit more glamorous, and obviously then you get the real meat, and then yeah, it just works really well.
Tremendous. 5 days a week here or 6 days a week?
6 days a week.
6 days a week, yeah. Closed on Sundays.
Closed on Sundays. My wife makes me sure 1 day a week to spend some time with the family.
Well, we all want to try and do that. So you've got a lot of young disciples working for you here, I see.
Yeah, we've got 27 cooks in the brigade. Each bring their own unique talent and skill to the restaurant, and it's important for that, and it's important for me to nurture them and teach them and show them the right and wrong ways of doing things, and then they take out that what they will, and then they move on to the next place, and that's really important. You know, I help them go to, some of my chefs have gone on to Noma, to Alzac, to, you know, Perse, to you name it. We send them out there because I want them to be the best, you know. Yeah.
And do they return? Do you get people coming back?
Yeah, we get some coming back, you know, and some of them we don't want back. I want them to go off and be their own chefs, you know. They've done a couple of years for me, and that's plenty, you know. Because there's always, if you're good at what you do, the next generation will always want to work for you.
Sure. And the future of restaurants in this country, is it rosy?
Yeah, I think so. I mean we've now passed. I think we've gone past the point of no returns. I mean, which I'm thankful for. You know, people in this country, we're in love with food. Sure. We love going to restaurants. We love enjoying ourselves. We love wine. We love, you know, just going out with friends and family, which 20 years ago when I started to cook in the early 1990s, it was deemed an unnecessary luxury. Sure. So when the last recession took a hold, it was dreadful that chefs like Christian Deltel at La Le Coin and David Cavalier really struggled during that recession, because these chefs were just beautiful chefs. Yeah. And if they had their day today, would probably be, you know, massive success. Well, I mean, there's still are successes, but if you know what I mean. I do indeed. It's a lot easier now to be a success, purely because as a nation, we're more, we take it on board more, you know, and we're willing to go and try new restaurants. And where in the olden days, there was literally 5 or 6 chefs you could work for in the UK, from Monsieur Blanc to Kaufman to, you know. Ball down at Connaught. Yeah, you know, and exactly. Where now today, there's hundreds. Yeah. There's hundreds of chefs.
Jason, thank you very much for your time. It's much appreciated.
Mr. Ackerman, it's a pleasure.
So just while we're on the Fat Duck, that was your first restaurant, wasn't it?
Yes. In fact, it was my very first, just to put the record straight, it was my very, very first paid job as a chef. Really? So I'm self-taught. I've never worked, other than I did a stint at the Manoir. I did about 2 weeks at the canteen, but that was it. It was my first paid job as a chef. Yeah.
Straight in.
Yeah.
Baptism of fire.
Yeah. Had I have known, and it was two things. I think what happened is it allowed me, being so, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody else, to be honest. It just worked for me, but it could have all gone horribly wrong. I think it allowed me to ask questions, be prepared to ask questions. The downside of it was I think I made life a lot harder for myself, because I just didn't have that experience, and it probably took a bit longer. But it allowed my style to flourish in the way that it did. But yeah, it was really different. We opened with myself and a pot washer. It was 16th of August, 17 years ago last week.
Is that right?
Yeah, last week. Yeah. So and you know the restaurants. I mean, we've now got 50 chefs. We do 42 people. It's a long far cry from being a pot washer.
Absolutely, absolutely. It was phenomenal, the success you've acquired at the Fat Duck, voted best restaurant in the world, and takes a bit of doing. But then you changed course and opened up a pub.
Yes, yeah.
So,
funny enough, it probably helped. The whole sort of historic element was probably helped by the Hind's Head, because upstairs there were these wonderful photographs of the Queen going there for, I think, 1963. You look at the guest list on the wall. It was heads of state of most of the countries in Europe. They dropped a bomb on that place. It would have it would have been very damaging. But the interesting thing is they all turned up on a bus.
really?
It wouldn't happen these days, would it? So there was some interesting history on through the Hind's Head.
You covered the whole lot, really, from dinner through to the Fat Duck.
For me, what the Duck is about is it's not somewhere where I expect or want people to come once a month or once every 4 months or 6 months even. It's maybe once a year, once every couple of years, once a lifetime, and that's the purpose of it. Is really meant to be about. It is about the experience.
It's theatre as well as food, isn't it?
With the whole thing about modern cooking now, I think it's settled down. When this first came out, there was this whole sort of thing that people were. It was all about pipettes and syringes and funny gummy stuff, and any movement of cooking that's happened, take nouvelle cuisine, there is always going to be a negative side of it, and there's always going to be a side where people will translate. Chefs will translate that and actually not get the basis or the heart of it at all. That sort of thing's now died down. There's much more sort of modern techniques that we've sort of grown to accept and have filtered across the sort of different styles of cooking. So for that, I think that there is no such thing. I don't think you can take a style of cooking that's bad. There's good and bad cooking.
Do you think our taste buds have actually changed?
I think what's happened is our flavour preferences have changed a lot, and even in the last 10 years, if you look at, I know when I first sort of playing around with the savoury ice creams and the Duck, people were sort of, some people loved it and some people, you can't serve that. It's not because of expectation. Ice cream, a savoury ice cream was perceived as being weird because we just never grew up with it. Although there are recipes going back a couple of hundred years for savoury ices. Change the name of a dish. So the first one of any note, savoury one of any note we put on the Duck was probably 97. It's crab ice cream. And I just thought it was amazing and fascinating. You tell somebody it's crab ice cream. Some people, love it. Some people, oh my God, I can't eat that. If you then say it's frozen crab bisque, okay, completely change the perception of what their food's going to be.
Sure.
And I think just in that, in the last 10 years, we have become far more open-minded about things, far more adventurous. I think that's been helped by lots of things. I think sort of from modern cooking. I think the internet. I think it's so much easier to cross to we have more of an understanding of other food cultures. I think we're more concerned about where our food comes from than ever before. All these things have gone to make a big difference. So I think our taste buds. I think our flavour preferences have definitely changed a lot. And mine, from a cooking point of view, I've become over the last. Probably 5-6 years ago, I started becoming really quite obsessed about acidity, and I think chefs always talk about salt, but for me, the dish, the taste that adds the kind of backbone to a dish, bitterness a little bit as well, but it's acidity, and I think we just don't use it enough. We always think about and taste things in isolation. So if a chef is tasting a sauce, you might taste it thinking they're going to be eating soup.
In what forms do you mean acidity?
Well, the use of vinegars, the use of citrus fruits, the use of acidic powders, so tartaric, lactic, malic, all of these acids have just a slight different characteristic, which if you have a sauce that doesn't have enough acidity into it, it's that mouth-watering. We describe food, mouth-watering is a really positive way to describe our food. It's acidity that makes your mouth water. You don't have to close your eyes and think about biting into a lemon. You can feel your tongue wanting to go.
Sure. And
that's a really positive sign. So it's things like the use of that in cooking and the way you can deliver those effects. So encapsulation. So we register the rate of change of flavour. So for example, if you were to take a cup of coffee with 1 ground coffee bean, it'd be really insipid. But take the cup of water and have a coffee bean, crunch the bean and knock back the water, you get a much bigger coffee flavour. Yeah. It's because you've encapsulated that, and I've started to use it, was using that, I've used in my cooking, things like, you know, if you're going to put coriander in a dish, rather than grinding it up, let's have a carrot and coriander soup, just a few grains of coriander, every now and then you get the crunch and gives you that burst of flavour. It's just creating those bursts while you eat, and I think there's things like that at the duck that we've moved elements of, and we've actually incorporated in the menu here. So we'll find there is a very clear note of acidity running through the whole menu.
That's intriguing. Heston, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Ray.
This is the way it shows the diversity of beers available now in Britain. And what Srim and the restaurant are trying to do is have really a beer for every mood, beer for every food, which they do in the restaurant. So here, really interesting example of a vintage beer. So this is Fuller's Vintage Ale 2004. The restaurant serves 1999 up to 2010. And they started making this at Fuller's in about 1996. And all the brews are about 8.5, 9% alcohol. So they're stronger. And people say to me, how can you have a strong beer like that? Isn't that a headbanger? Well, actually, served in a brandy balloon, as it is here, it isn't a headbanger at all. It's actually very light. You're comparing it really with a brandy or an Armagnac at 40% alcohol, or a whiskey. So for me, this is a very delicate brew. Lots and lots of hops in there. And it's aged for a number of years, will probably age for another 10, 20 years after this. So I think a fantastic digestif of a beer. This is an interesting example of a new beer from London, Camden Helles Lager, brewed in Camden. And they're suddenly trying to, all sorts of breweries in Britain now trying to produce lagers rather than just ales. And this is brewed on German style, which makes it quite floral and slightly honeyed. So it's slightly sweet. I think it's a delicious, easy brew. So it's not trying to be just refreshing, and that's probably true of all these beers. They're not trying just for refreshment. They're actually trying to be gastronomically interesting as well and to pair with food. Here we go this is a brewery from in Cornwall, Sharps Brewery. This is brewed with Rick Stein, and it's called Chalky's Bark, named after his dog. Oh, yes. He also does Chalky's Bite, which I love, which has fennel in. This one, Chalky's Bark, actually has ginger in it. So it goes back in times before we had hops in 1500, when a lot of the ingredients of a beer would be a tree bark, flowers, fruit, herbs, spices. And this is, I think, a very refreshing, lovely gingery beer. So spicy beer, spicy food, it's a no-brainer. This is a lovely beer started in 2003 from Scotland called Innis and Gunn Oak Aged Beer. It's all the beers from this brewery are actually aged with wood or in wood. So they use oak the whole way through, but sometimes they use a really grungy old barrel from abroad. If they can't transfer it, or they don't reckon the beer can get to every element of the wood, they actually will crash up the barrel, smash it up, and actually pour the beer on top. So they have a different beer oak treatment for each one they do. Fantastically good with anything that's caramelized. So the black cod here, absolute cinch this baby. This is a very new brew, brewed by an English winery, and it's a lager, but the lager style of this one is trying to be more Sauvignon Blanc in character, more in your face. I think it's highly refreshing, but it's more for your fish, and it's more for maybe lemon chicken, those sort of things, which actually would benefit from a bit of lemon. And finally, this lovely beer called Ceilidh, as in dancing, from Scotland, from Alloa. This is a new example, again, of British lagers. And this brewery does a heather beer, it does a gooseberry beer, it does all sorts of strange, interesting beers. And I think it's lovely, delicate, slightly spicy, but much leaner.
Thank you. The Sandpiper in Wensleydale is a rural restaurant, and owner Jonathan Harrison is keen to make as much of that as he can, building his menu around local produce, including local livestock, which he buys and butchers for the restaurant himself.
We run a very rural restaurant. I suppose we run it like a French bistro, you know, we source fantastic local ingredients and we try and keep the prices competitive. We're in a very still quite relatively unknown area of the Yorkshire Dales. It's a fantastic melting pot. The idea is that we source local ingredients which come from about 20 miles from the Sandpiper whenever possible. All our vegetables come from the Dale, and we're very lucky. I feel very honoured to be here, and we'll sort of tailor the menu to what's coming into us really. We've got a little terrine that we've got on the blackboard. It's a ham hock terrine. So they've been slow cooked, confit right down, and then we basically flake it all off the bone with some vegetables, garlic, all those sort of things. We serve that with some confit shallots, which have been in balsamic vinegar, slow cooked down, and we serve it with that, just some watercress and a little bit of pea shoots. We've done a little dish that we've had just taken off the blackboard menu at the moment, but it was one of my favourites. I suppose it was inspired a little bit by my time with Ducasse. It's a little seared scallop and lobster salad. It's lots of crispy ingredients, little balsamic dressing, very light, a little bit of lobster sauce. Lots of different textures, but great flavours. A lot of what we cook is what I enjoy to eat. We had some wood pigeons that came into us fresh today, and they're absolutely fantastic. So we've just got them on with a little pea risotto. And the pigeons came in. I know risotto sells well, whatever we do with it. And the combination works well. It's on with a few wild mushrooms as well, so you've got all that earthy flavour with it. We've got fantastic Dale's lamb, which we buy on the hoof from the auction mart. It's the best stuff I've ever had to work with.
55, 50, 50 cent, 50 cent, 50 cent, 50 cent, 50 cent, £6, 56, 58, 56, 58, 56, 80, 57, 57, 20, 57, 20, 57, 58, 57, 80, 57, 87, 87, 80.
We buy textiles, Shropshires, Wensleydales, whatever really, whatever's good that day on the auction mart. They go off to Bainbridge to get slaughtered, and then we do all our own butchery ourselves. So what we do is we put a little trio on, and we've done a couple of lamb cutlets, some slow-cooked lamb that we've flaked off the bone, pressed, and a couple of kidneys. And then we've just done some summer veg and a dauphinoise potatoes, a little truffle jus. We source our beef locally, usually Dexter beef, which is bred down the road, and then that goes off to get slaughtered, and then we have a butcher hang that for 32 days for us. That comes into us, and then we probably hang it for about another week. So we've got great ribeye steaks, we've got Wensleydale beef on the menu. We slow cook it for about 6 hours. We then trim it, and we serve that with roasted vegetables, a fondant potato, and a butcher at the top of the marketplace makes us a black pudding, so we serve a little tranche of that on top. It's quite a coarse black pudding, but it's got great flavour. That works so well with the beef, you see, because that's been trimmed, there is no fat on it, it's just a lean piece of meat which has been slow cooked. So you've got a little bit of pepperiness of the black pudding, but the lardo in there to keep it moist as well. I love chocolate, so we've done a little chocolate terrine, and it's just with a little praline ganache and a little peanut brittle croissant that we've made. This is one of my favourite dishes off the menu. Very simple. It's a white chocolate mousse, dark chocolate mousse and a milk chocolate mousse. Layered together with sponge, and then on the bottom we put a little bit of feuilletine mixed with a little bit of ganache. Feuilletine's just basically pancakes made in France, very thinly cooked and then dried out in the oven, so they become very crispy, almost like perfect cornflakes, I suppose you'd call them. Every cheese that we have on our cheese board is produced within the Yorkshire Dales. We have a Mrs. Bell's Blooming White, which is like almost like a brie. We have a Jervo Blue, which is our blue cheese. We've got a smoked Ribblesdale. We've also got obviously a Wensleydale, but a hand-raised one, which is very different. And then we've almost got a truckle on the menu, which comes from Wensleydale. So we've picked out local cheeses, and it's absolutely fantastic. And it was basically, you know, we get to use this produce, and we're very honoured to use, you know, their food.
William Curley, a masterclass in chocolate. That's what the title says. I mean, it's been very well received, this book.
Yes, I like to think so, yes.
What made you want to write it?
I think all chefs want to put their work down as a little bit of a legacy, and I think the book very much portrays the image, the recipes, the style, the dishes of what William and Suzu Curley have as a business here and now, and yeah, we're very proud of it.
It's jolly hard work writing books, isn't it?
I think the better it will be, the more you put into it. So no pain without gain, as the slogan goes.
So the two of you were involved in writing this, your wife and yourself?
Oh, very much, yeah. I think everything we do as a business is very much involved. Behind every great man, as they say, there's a great woman. Actually,
to produce this book, how long did it take you?
Well, You could say best part of 25 years. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of recipes and ideas and concepts that even come back from the time when I was an apprentice at Gleneagles Hotel, and then with Mr. Kaufman and Monsieur Blanc and Marco himself. So all of that kind of falls into it. But from, if you want, doing a deal with the publisher, who was fantastic, Jackie Small, I think it took us about 18 months, 20 months from concept to release.
It's an interesting book because a professional could read it, but you can also read it as someone at home.
Absolutely, and that's what we've tried to do. We've tried to make things, we've tried to break things down the best we can, so a keen amateur could have a go at making things, but likewise, if you're a professional chef, you would take hopefully inspiration and ideas from it as well. So it's really what we do in the business, and really it's just to inspire people to try to become patissiers, chocolatiers.
It's wonderful. Oh, there's a picture of you both there. Now you've had some awards for this book, haven't you?
Yes. This year it was voted by the Guild of Food Writers Cookery Book of the Year. So to receive an accolade like that, we were absolutely thrilled. Overblown, actually, to be honest. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, it's your first book.
First book, yes, and to be received in the way it has been, we're absolutely thrilled.
Well, they've got a lot of information in this book. Are there any particular recipes you think one can have a go at, which, if you're not so proficient?
I think starting with things like the truffles, the couture chocolates, some of the bouchées, I think that's entry level to what I would sort of say. Maybe the patisserie is a little bit more technical, a little bit more stage 2, but hopefully everything's explained in a manner that allows you to have a go.
And your inspiration for this has come from your life in the trade, obviously.
Absolutely.
Did you have any heroes when you were younger?
I worked for some of my heroes, which was a great pleasure. Obviously, a massive fan of French patisserie. People like Pierre Hermé, Jean-Paul Heaven, are always going to inspire us in what we do. And I guess my wife, like I say, comes from Japan. And in Japan now there's some fabulous patissiers there. In Tokyo, in Osaka, where Suzu comes from, there is some fabulous patissiers and also chocolatiers that are now starting to appear, because the Japanese do love French patisserie and chocolates. So there is that sort of going on there. So there's a chap in Tokyo called Segino, who for me is one of, if not the best patissier in the world. His shops and his cakes are absolutely fantastic. So a forward in the book from Pierre Kaufman, who I worked for many years ago. And then I get into a little bit about the history, how chocolate is produced, sort of key things about tasting chocolate, how to store it, that type of thing. Tempering, of course, which is very, very important for us chocolatiers.
Tell me about tempering.
Well, tempering, when you buy a bar of chocolate, it comes in a tempered state, so it has a matte or a glossy finish. It snaps and it's very pleasant to the eye. As a chocolatier, I have to ensure when I make my products, whether I'm going to dip it or I'm going to make a bar, or for decorations, I have to reformat the chocolate. So we melt it, we warm it to a certain temperature, we cool it, we agitate the crystals, and then we warm it up a little bit again, which puts it back into a temper format. Now, of course, me saying this just now, it's like, whoa, but I think it's the sort of thing that if you practice and you develop your skills, it's something that you can do.
Okay.
But anyway, we start really with truffles, which I think is probably the simplest thing in the book to make. Then we go into the couture chocolates, which are a little bit more technical. It's about infusing different flavours, so we like the fresh and natural approach to what we do. So this sort of epitomises that within William Curley. And then as it sort of develops, things such as making a pâte de fruits, how we make Fontine biscuits, couture chocolates continue. Then of course we've got the caramels, the famous sea salt caramels, which every good chocolatier in London now really has. And interesting sort of flavours, maybe unique flavours that are a little bit different, such as a rosemary and olive oil chocolate, your Japanese black vinegar.
Rosemary and
olive oil.
Oh right, okay.
We have a Muscovado caramel, which was Britain's best chocolate in 2011. Walnut brittle, Fontine bar biscuits, flavouring bars, but again using everything natural with the herbs to dry and infusing the cocoa butter rather than the cream. Honeycomb.
So you've got a full gambit here.
There's a lot going on, yeah. And then of course as it goes on, you've got the biscuits, cakes.
And I guess all of these are available in the shop.
Absolutely, it's what we do in the business. This is what you can see, and then the patisserie at the end.
And where can you buy it?
You can buy it in good bookstores, obviously online, and of course I can do a signed copy here in the shop.
From here. So you're best to come here and get a signed
That's the
copy.
best way. Come to the shop.
And buy a chocolate as well.
Indeed, make it an experience. Have a Curley experience.
Would you write another one?
We're hoping to do a second book, yes. And this time, this book is all about chocolate. I think the next one's got to be all about patisserie.
Okay. It's a great book. I look forward to reading it. Thanks very much indeed, William.
You're welcome. Thank you.
John, lobster dish.
Well, what can I say? I mean, lobster to me, we're on an island, we should have lobster. We have the best lobster in the world. Much better than anything else that I've ever tasted. It's very, very important when you're actually cooking lobster, it must be alive. Yeah. The other important factor is, humanely, put the lobster in the freezer for about 45 minutes, and then of course, the lobster's asleep. You then just drop it into boiling water, the lobster doesn't know anything about it. So, once we've done that, what we actually do is, we take the claw meat and the tail meat out, and then we're just going to warm it for a couple of minutes,
right,
and then it will be actually perfectly cooked. This would be the carcass meat that's left over, just been blanched. We're going to very quickly make a sauce. We use every single bit of the lobster. Take the carcass and really roast until it becomes quite red.
So just a spoonful of butter in there?
Yeah, nothing more. But then I've got what is commonly known as a mirepoix, a little bit of ginger, a touch of cardamom, and coriander leaf. Okay. And in a nutshell, I always like to use celeriac, fennel, all of the sweet vegetables rather than anything else. Onion, and a little carrot. So it's sauteing that. That will take, normally speaking, a good 15 minutes. And obviously we're speeding it up a little touch, but you need that to really roast, because when you roast that, it actually releases the oils and the flavors that you want, and that will give you the flavor in the sauce. Ginger works so well with lobster. As we saute it, it softens, and it mustn't be overpowering. Rest assured, when you taste this, you'll hardly taste the ginger. A couple of pods of cardamom. Now always be very careful with cardamom, it's very heady, very, very powerful. I only use 2 pods. The next thing that we actually have is a little bit of cognac. It's in a container there, and just let that reduce and burn off. We then add a little bit of chicken stock. Notice the chicken stock. I'm a great believer that the stock for lobster must be fairly neutral, hence the reason. If you use fish stock, it overpowers the lobster. So I find that very, very important. The next stock that we have is a lobster stock in its own right. We do that by just taking the carcasses of the lobster and making a fine stock from that. It's just a very, very simple stock. But when you have seafood, if you use shellfish, I always use the words to the guys, it's a sweet shellfish sauce. Yeah. And it must have a sweetness. And once that's there, we just add a little touch of coriander, a couple of stalks and leaves in there, and then that has to actually come down and reduce. Inside here, we have a little touch of cream, water, clarified butter. It's just a poaching liquor, so that it's very, very neutral. This is so important. Once again, if you heat the lobster in a fish stock, you kill the lobster. So the whole idea is to have this neutral effect so that we actually have the full flavor of the lobster. At approximately 50 degrees and just warming it up. Here we have the lobster reduction there, which is just coming on nicely there now. It was actually blanched, the tail meat is actually blanched for 2 minutes. Now the claws, it's quite important, the claws must stay in the water for a minimum of 4 minutes so that they actually release away from the carcass. You know, when you add salt, if you actually add salt when you're making reduction, what happens? It becomes more powerful. Right. So it's very important. What I do, I always believe at different phases of cooking, you will add a little bit of salt. But on something like this, when it's seafood, just added it at the end because obviously seafood has got salt in it already. We add our cream and then bring this to the boil and literally just gently cook this for about 5 to 10 minutes. No more. And now a little bit of pepper. And the most wonderful salt in the world. A little touch of Maldon sea salt. There's nothing like the crack when you actually just sprinkle a little touch of salt onto the anything, meat, fish, whatever. And when you actually get that little crystal, I find it superb, superb. My humble belief is by using Maldon salt, you don't use quite as much, which is actually a little bit healthier as well. And it's just a matter of cutting down. Can you just see how this is cooked, Roy? It's lovely and opaque. It's just to the point. Can you see it?
Oh, yes.
You don't want it more cooked than that. If you cook it more than that, that's when, you know when people say, this lobster's hard?
Sure. That's
when. And then inside here, I've already prepared a light cauliflower puree. It's just cauliflower that's been cooked in some cream, a little bit of milk, and water with a touch of butter. Once that's then cooked, we then liquidize it and actually add some of that cream just to monte inside. So it's a matter of dressing. Nothing on the plate unless it has flavour.
Sure. No unnecessary garnishes.
No, and especially on something like this, because all you do is you take away the flavour of what is a very, very noble product. Now remember the texture? It's just there. When I have a textured sauce like this, it's very important that I just use my Bumex just to give it a little touch of texture. It only aerates it, but it gives the appearance that you've actually got a little bit more texture to your sauce. Yeah. Now, I'm desperate for you to taste this, Roy.
Well, as desperate as I am to taste it.
Last but not least, I'd just like to serve 1 or 2 little medallions
What's that?
of ginger, which has just been blanched. And lastly, just a little bit of chervil.
So along with Maldon salt, ginger's the secret.
Wait, that was the last bit. I just wanted to fleck a little bit of crunchy sea salt for you from Maldon, and see what you think of that, please, Roy.
What a miserable life.
And taste the claw.
Oh my God. That is beautiful. You're quite right. That crunchiness that really makes it good.
This is a fricassee of lobster with cauliflower puree and ginger.
On the menu here?
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know, this dish is another dish. You know, I keep certain dishes with me as whether you call them specialities, they're dishes I believe in.
Cool cucumber.